be our first trial week of doing 2 episodes in a week, and we kind of decided, because of how things generally go with our podcast, that we'll do one day that's kind of like a bunch of topics mishmashed, and then one day that's us talking about certain content.
Hmm.
And so to kind of intro this, we're going to talk about Circe today because it's what we have planned. And then later this week, we're going to be talking about a grooming case that's currently all over social media that we think needs to be discussed, especially considering the age group we like to talk about. Percy Show news, I saw that they started announcing some of the directors for season 3, and I know you're a little bit more familiar with like what episodes they've shot and stuff. I saw one was one of the female directors.
Yeah, I was glad about that. Her name is Katronia? Katrina. It's Katrina, but a little bit different, and I've never heard it pronounced out
Yeah.
loud yet, so I'm not sure how to say it. But for now, I'm just gonna say Katrina McKenzie. Um,
Hmm.
she is doing. She said she's doing 3 episodes, and
Hmm.
that one of the episodes is the finale and also the siren scene. And so I'm
Hmm.
guessing at this point that she's going to do 6, 7, and 8, which, um, like the Circe Island stuff, going into the
Yeah.
siren scene, going into, uh,
Wait,
or
that would be season 2 though, right?
yeah, they were talking about season 2.
Oh, okay. There
um,
was one that they said for season 3 that was a guy though, right?
oh yeah, James Bobin. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, James Bobin is doing episodes 1 and 2 of season 3.
Hmm.
They're not gonna like announce any where we would know about anything else but that at this point because it's too early on.
Yeah.
That's the only episodes that they would be like fully planning like production wise, like where they have everybody else, but it's just like those people aren't working right now. Um, and so yeah, so James Bobin is doing the first 2 episodes of the Titans Curse season, and then there was an interview with Katrina McKenzie about her work with season 2, where she did 3 episodes and the
Yeah.
finale. She was
Yeah, I
talking
know her,
about like
like
special
on Twitter,
effects.
she's like, everybody's been looking forward to this one, so great. And she's like nervous.
Yeah, she was the one who Becky like came up to her very first day on set, and like she said the first thing Becky ever said to her ever was warning her about how the fans can be.
Yep.
Like about how like everyone is gonna like look at everything you post, and so just like be careful about that. And she said she was like laughing, telling Becky like that's the literally the first thing you ever said to me. And I remember posting like talking about that on here before. I'm like, yeah, that's the Aries moon part of you. You just got to protect your people.
Yep.
And that's her. She's made it her job to make sure everyone on set knows that how like the expectations on the show are a little bit higher than normal with like the amount of attention there is on everything that you do, and so
Yeah.
just like be aware of that while you're going into this production. But it was just like Katrina like laughed when she was telling her that that's like the first words you ever said to me. I'm like, intensity, okay? Like there's either you either have it all or you have nothing. That's all you can really do when you have an Aries moon.
How far away are we from D23?
D23 I don't think happens this year. Because
Okay.
D23 is one of those every other year things. Like they're doing
Okay.
Disney is doing something in December, like early December, because I saw on Instagram that like the Brazilian fans are trying to do like a social media sort of thing to try to get to see if some of the cast could like come to that because it's in
Hmm.
Brazil. And like they did that last year too, where like the cast did like the main trio and Rick did like a live stream during
Yeah.
like the thing that they were there and just did it that way because I was saying like that's probably going to be hard because they'll be filming Titan's Curse and probably at the same time like starting to do press for season 2.
Yeah.
And so it'll be challenging to have anybody from the actual show be there just because of when things are happening.
Yeah.
But I don't. You guys should try because Brazil is like hugely into Percy Jackson. Like a lot of,
Yeah.
I guess, Brazil was one of their like biggest markets outside of the U.S. And so they want people to go there if it's physically possible for them to actually physically be there.
Yeah.
Um, what am I thinking of? Oh, but yeah, other than that, like the 20th anniversary is June 28th for the Lightning Thief, so there are probably going to be more things as we get closer to that day.
Hmm.
Um, and then like a month later, Comic-Con is.
Yeah.
And in like the end of July, like July 22nd, 23rd or something was when it was last year. And so it's probably going to be around that same time this
Yeah.
year. I haven't even looked it up because I'm taking like 1 week at a time to see like what happens. And
Yeah.
so whenever that is, they'll announce like there's so many things they could choose from of what they could announce. I'm assuming though, like my general assumption at this point is that last year during Comic Con was when they showed the video from Rick and they announced Tyson. They announced that Daniel was playing
Yes, that's
Tyson,
true.
and so I feel like it's a safer route to announce like Nico and Bianca and
Ooh.
just show like video of them. They're
Yeah.
not there. They won't be, hopefully. Oh my
Yeah.
god. If they are there, they'll announce it before that moment. But I just like feel anxiety in my body when I imagine those like little kids actually being there just because of
Yeah.
like the thrust of like just opinions
Here
on
you
them.
go. So many people love your character.
Like, okay, people have like emotional attachments to your character one way or another, and they're gonna have a reaction just purely based on what you look like.
Exactly.
That's it. That's it. And
Yeah.
like, of course, I want them to tell me Zoe beforehand so that I just know who she is. So
Hmm.
I can have like an emotional moment of crying about that. But
Yeah.
other than that, that's what we have coming up that wise of that we know of at least. Like, who knows what else they're this production is very random in like the most fun sort of ways. They just kind of do things. Like I still think it's funny that people like forgot that Rick did an interview with Screen Rant with Liam, who's a huge like Percy Jackson fan, and he just asked Disney like, "Can I tell them who Thalia is?" And they were like, "Yeah, sure." And he was like, "Oh, okay."
Okay. Yep.
And he just like told him during the interview, and like Liam's eyes looked like they were gonna fall out of his head because he was just like, "What?" Like he did not expect during his interview for Rick to be like, "Actually, I get to announce with you who Thalia is," and he's like,
Yep.
"What's going on in my life?" um, and so yeah, that's what's going on with that. There's nothing else going on that I hopefully nothing else
Yeah,
will happen.
we're thinking show news might come out. So it's something that Mason said that I've been thinking about ever since, and it was around the time of the leaks, where he said like this show is geared towards children, so why would
Hmm.
they be advertising while kids are still in school? Which makes sense. Williams' last week is this week, and I know a bunch
Hmm.
of schools in my area are either already out or getting out this week as well. So my thoughts are we're probably going to get another teaser trailer with probably Comic-Con since that one's coming up soon, maybe.
Yeah.
That we could talk a little bit about Circe more. Because this book, I was not expecting to feel my mom within the character of Circe, like
Ay,
immediately.
ay, ay.
That got to me. That got to me. Okay, so I kind of want to preface this with that backstory because part of the reason why I think that I gravitate towards scapegoats, why like a lot of my friends tend to be people who were scapegoated with their family, even though I'm a former golden child, is because my mom was a scapegoat. And the person I was enmeshed with my entire life was a scapegoat. And my mom happened to be the only girl of four brothers. And like the youngest of them too. My theory is because my mom and my grandma share a name because they thought my grandma was going to die in childbirth. Something happened to where my grandma was like not conscious for a few days after my mom was born, and I thoroughly believe that whatever chemical things need to happen with mothers in those early bonding stages did not happen with my grandma, and that's why she is the way she is. That is her villain origin story, in my opinion.
That's fine.
Yeah.
She's got to have one because she's definitely the villain.
Yeah, like there's a bunch of other villainous things that probably predate that, but that is one of the villain origin stories of my life. And so my mom had a not close and happy relationship with her mother, and she thinks the world of her dad. Like, it's kind of funny because my mom tries to be anti-astrology since she's very heavily Christian. And like when when one of my uncles died recently, that's one of her brothers, I I had said something recently is kind of a stretch, it was 2018, but I had said something when I found out his birthday, like, oh, he's an Aries. And she's like, no, he's not. He's just a person. And I was like, this is coming from the same lady who used to point out that you thought it was fate that I was a Leo born very close in birthday to your dad, who passed away when you were younger. Like, you can't have both. Either you have
Mm-mm.
two Leos that are very close in your life and mean a lot to you, or, like no astrology. It's one or the other.
Yeah.
Um,
And there
yes,
are astrology patterns in people's families.
there are.
And also like just in like life in general, like I
Yes.
saw this I saw this article recently that was talking about the different astrology signs and like how many on average there are and like the most common ones and things like that. And
Hmm.
they said that I think they were doing it for sun signs.
Yeah.
And they said that there's only 6% of people who are born have an Aquarius sun. And I have an
Okay.
Aquarius sun, and at least like half of the people that I've become friends with in some way, shape, or form, especially as an adult, have an Aquarius sun, or they know somebody who has an Aquarius sun,
Hmm.
or they have other Aquarius placements, like she's a Aquarius rising. And I
Yeah.
was just like, what is the like there it's just one of
Yeah.
those funny things that most of the people that I end up being really good friends in their life in my life, they either have some sort of Saturn thing, like whether they have Aquarius or Capricorn or both. And I'm
Hmm.
like, what are the chances of that when those are things that are in like my family, like with me and my sister?
Hmm.
That's just weird.
Yeah, and like Aquarius, like my son is an Aquarius. He's February 8th, and my father-in-law, same exact birthday. So I've always had like it's not strictly Aquariuses, it's like an air sign thing. Like for some reason, air sign energy is just what I gravitate towards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but anyways, all that is to say, I grew up with a mom who idolized her dad, who may or may not have been a good person. I don't really know. He died before I was born, so there's not any way for me to say for sure. But having gone through therapy for the enmeshment that I have towards my mom, I heavily theorized that she was enmeshed with him in a very similar way. And like both of them would escape the abusiveness that was my grandma that way. Because when I was reading Circe talking about sitting at her dad's feet, like it reminded me of how my mom would talk about my grandpa. Meanwhile, he cheated on his wife and he was a military man, so he was always gone, leaving my mom to be abused by her mom. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, how
And I
great is he?
and I will say that when it comes to that there's always something like going on, I'll say, with the other parent if you
Hmm.
stay married to them for a long amount of time. Like I don't know how if like were your did your grandparents ever get divorced? Probably
They
not.
did eventually, and he ended up marrying his affair partner. Had one more child, to my knowledge. So I do have an uncle who's like a half uncle, but
Mm-hmm.
I've only met him a couple times.
Okay.
And like my mom had a very bad relationship with her stepmom.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Just because of they're competing for the same person. So
exactly.
like how can they have a good relationship? But I will just say that there is something to that. Like when there is one partner that is abusive, the other person can't be like a well like adjusted, healthy, like attachment style minded person because
Hmm.
if they were, they wouldn't be able to stay in a relationship with that person
Exactly.
without unless that person like changed. Like there
Hmm.
people are capable of doing that, and so if that is a situation where that happens, then they would change and then their relationship would work, but obviously that didn't happen.
Hmm.
And so if they stayed, they have to there has to have been things going on there with him too in some way for her
Hmm.
to have ended up like she is, like the way that she cries to get whatever she wants. That feels like whenever she wanted to get something from her dad, she would just cry and then he would
Yeah.
just like give in. And that's not a healthy dynamic to be it's like it's bad in both extreme directions.
Yeah, so she
Um,
had both. She had both the heavy enmeshment and the abuse. And my grandpa unfortunately died when my mom was an early teenager. And that has shaped a lot of her life. But yeah, like what got to me was just the comparison of like Cersei opens up talking about her family and how she was born in the family that she grew up in.
mhm,
And so her mythology is her parents are a nymph named Perseus, I think is how you say it, but it's like or Percy. It sometimes I see it Perseus and sometimes I see it Percy. But she is a daughter of Oceanus, and then her father is Helios. And so she spends all day with this very vain mother who like doesn't really seem to care about her, especially because she was a firstborn girl. Like, what value is this girl to me? And Oceanus is just like, well, we could sell these nymphs for some money, you know, like to doesn't
mhm.
matter who we marry them off to. She's beautiful. And Cersei gets bullied by her brother and sister, Perses and Pasiphae. It's just like this dynamic that's set up in the first chapter, especially. It was just like, holy crap, we're jumping right in.
Yeah, I will. Oh, I've been. My plan is to make like a trigger warning, like at least I don't want to
Yes.
say guide, but just like say what like by each chapter, because there are so many in this book. That was the only way I could like. I feel like that's like me keeping my sanity reading this book as it gets more intense is to know that I'm like having to write that down every time I read these
Yeah.
chapters, no matter how bad they are for me. But I wanted to say for chapter one, there is a mention of bestiality, which
Hmm.
is the like trigger warning for that chapter. And then chapter two, there's self harm, and there was something else that now I can't remember. But the self harm one was the one that I wanted to make sure to write down because that stuff can be difficult for
Yeah.
people. Chapter three doesn't have any, so there's that. But yeah, when I was reading like the first like I don't know the first like couple pages, it
Hmm.
was just like hard for me to like keep going. Like I kept getting like distracted and not wanting to read it, and I'm like because this is like my stupid family.
Hmm.
I don't want to read this, and like part of it. This is just always how I think about when we get to see like the god side, I
Hmm.
suppose, of like the Greek mythology, just the mythology. I I will never understand why people end up like worshiping the gods because this is what they're like. And I'm like,
Yeah.
why do you like this? Like I just will never get it. And I know that's because of life experience most likely that I don't have like
Hmm.
any interest in that at all. It just is I'm like, yeah, cuz this is what the gods are like. Like they're horrible.
Yeah.
Like I thought I thought that it was interesting the way that Madeline Miller kind of uses the prophetic powers
Hmm.
that Helios has, that it's like a test in a way that these children, as soon as they are literally like the second that they are born, they are put under like their first like test. And
Hmm.
it's if there's a prophecy about their life or not. And if there
Yes.
isn't a prophecy about them, they are meaningless and nobody cares about them anymore. And it's very clearly in this family the thing that makes you like the scapegoated one versus the golden child or the other roles that could exist. Because that's all it is with like her. Cersei is born. She doesn't have a
Hmm.
prophecy or anything. And so because of that, there's just this assumption that her life is going to be nothing and that
Yeah.
her as like a child in this world of gods doesn't matter because there's not like a huge prophecy about her being important somehow being out there. And so her mom just like immediately is like anyway like next.
Yep.
And it, One thing I will say about every time I read these stories, I'm always just think like, where did these ideas for these myths like come from? Like, why did like men in like these times write these stories, or like, because all these kind of stories are a reflection of whatever they were thinking about, whatever like societal things were going on at the time, the exact same way that art is like that for us now.
Yeah.
And so when I read a myth about a Greek god that's a woman that is able to like give birth, and then immediately after giving birth, her body is back to normal and perfectly fine. And she is like, come on, husband, let's go have sex again so we can make another baby since this one doesn't have a prophecy and she was a waste of time.
Oh my
I'm
gosh,
like,
yeah.
so I, that classics person that got upset with me about Medusa, the other time I saw her was when she was coming after somebody whose content I like and you like, about how women were viewed in like ancient Greece.
They're not segregated because of sexism. They're segregated because it's quite hard to have political based meetings when you're a guy who's involved in public life, when your 6 month old is screaming in the next room over. That's why. It's practicality.
Yeah.
And I was like, how can you read like a myth like this where like the idea of a god that is a woman, the thing that they think about is like, oh, you could have like babies way faster and have sex with me a lot faster if you were a Greek god, right? So let's like
Well,
make the Greek
to
god
be
of whatever
fair,
do
yeah.
this.
To be fair, this is a Madeline Miller invention. This idea that like so what she says is suddenly after like Circe's mom gives birth to her, her body goes right back to the way it was, like immediately loses that baby weight and she's just ready to go again. That I feel like it's implied in the mythology. It's not
Hmm.
talked about. But also, like, I have to wonder how much they knew certain things because when you have a baby, you're given the advice, like, do not have sex again for another 6 weeks. Not just because your body went through physical trauma and especially in that area, but like, just I've heard that it's easier to get pregnant again immediately after,
Hmm.
like, and I don't know how true that is or not. I don't know the science behind it, but I have to wonder if they at all recognize these patterns because even if you don't have the medical knowledge, you probably have the pattern recognition to be like, hey, when people get right back to it, they have babies again right away.
Hmm.
Um, so I almost wonder if it didn't even matter. Well, I know it didn't matter in the same way because this idea that we need thinness, that we need women to get right back to their shape that they were pre-pregnancy is a very modern idea. Like, I don't think anyone cared. You look at statues in Italy, like your mom's doing right now, and a
Hmm.
lot of them have bellies. They have extra skin around the area where a uterus would be. Nobody was looking at bodies like they had to be perfect in that way. And so this is a little bit of a Madeline Miller invention, but at the same time, I wouldn't say that it seems to come from nowhere. It comes
Mm-mm.
from the idea that that was your purpose, so you just get right back to it. And if a goddess is having babies, she could probably get back to it faster and better than a human.
Yeah. And there's just a lot of stories in general involving gods just like shooting out a bunch of babies
Yeah.
in like quick succession and just like moving on as if nothing ever happened. But I just thought that was such. I thought that the way that she used prophecy was very interesting. That's basically like the invisible test that these kids are under. There's always things like that when you're in a dysfunctional or abusive family. There's always like something
Hmm.
that you're supposed to somehow do when you have no idea what's going on,
Yeah.
because you're still always a little kid. It usually happens a little bit later in life than when you right after you're born. But it is like something that does happen in some way, and this is like the way that it happens in this one. That I just thought that was very interesting, how as soon as she doesn't have a prophecy, people just find everything that she does to be like grating and
Hmm.
annoying and like less than, or just not like somehow always not enough.
Yeah.
And it's like nothing has actually happened.
Yep.
Like
She's
nothing.
still young.
She's still the same like kid. She's not any different from her siblings or anything like that, but because they're her, and it's kind of like the irony of how she is with her dad in these first three chapters um that like he's the one who didn't say anything about her life when she was born. And so it's his power that really made her this rejected person in her family that everyone despises, but she somehow is like being nicest to him, or like wanting to be around him the most, or like wanting to think that he's nice when he's the one that kind of damned you in the first place. Um
Yeah, there's some notes I had before we get to her birth that I totally. So, the very first sentence, the name for what Circe is doesn't exist. This is because I could not remember when I was going back to source material. Is Circe a witch? Is she a mortal? Or is she a naiad of sorts? And the answer is she's kind of all three, like depending on the source. Homer uses the word goddess, and he uses the word goddess for a lot of these people that are technically nymphs. So I would put her in the nymph category. The mother is only interested in appearances, and we see this during the courtship phase, where she is being offered to Helios, and Helios thinks, oh, every girl wants to be with me. I'm literally the sun. Like, every girl would want to be with me willingly. Slave, regular mortal, goddess, whatever. I could get any girl I want. But Percy, she decides to say, I'll marry you if you promise you could do whatever you want outside of our house, but I am the only woman in this house. Like, so she cares about having that kind of image of being almost a sky Hera in a way of like, I am the queen here. Eventually, after having her four children, she's told, you're not allowed to have any more children with Helios, though. Um, so when Circe is born, to get back to where we were, the prophecy is, so she's born a girl. Mother is
oh
like,
wait, can I say something about that real quick, about that
yeah,
whole idea? That reminds me of that whole thing reminds me of some people that I'm related to. Just
hmm,
the idea that like powerful people, and just the idea that you know that the person is like sleeping with other people, but
hmm,
as long as it doesn't become an issue where it's like socially unacceptable, then you're okay with it. But then when it does happen, it's like it always somehow goes back on you and not him. I'm like,
yeah.
yeah, that reminds me so much of those people that I'm
Well,
related to.
and it makes me wonder what the. I don't know if you've seen any of this. I watched Do We Know Them a little bit too much. So they talked
Hmm.
about Catherine and Austin
Oh,
McBroom's
yeah.
divorce. So Catherine recently did an interview on Call Her Daddy where she's like, I kind of knew I was being cheated on, but I also didn't. And Austin kind of followed that up with, well, you said go do whatever you wanted to do. And so I thought you meant it's okay for you to do this because I'm not sleeping with you. And there it's just like weird because part of me wonders like what did they actually I never believe anything either of these people say. So I don't know
Hmm.
which one's telling the truth here. Like did she okay it and say like go ahead do what you need to do, or did he misinterpret some comment about like go take care of yourself, sir. You have hands. um
Yeah, I'm gonna believe her in that situation because just back in like 2020, 2021, when that initially first happened, I started watching video essays on YouTube back then because I was trying to
mhm.
figure out who they were, because I kept seeing people mention that family as like the worst family out there, and I'm like, well, every family channel is horrible. So
Yeah.
what's and I so I wanted to figure out what was so bad about those people, and that made me find a bunch of video essay people on YouTube. But back then when they were initially talking about it, the reason why people knew about it was because some of that stuff like leaked onto social media, like her being upset and like DMing people and being like, what are you doing, what is going on? And so I don't think that she would have been doing stuff like that if she actually said that it was fine.
Mhm.
I think that he just convinced himself of that in his mind. And
Yeah.
considering that the last time I heard of him was when he was trying to be a pimp,
Oh my gosh, yeah, an OnlyFans pimp.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, you don't care about boundaries or women or anything, so why would I believe anything you say, bro?
Yeah. So, it's giving the same energy is what I was thinking of. Just these are people that really only care about their appearance. So yeah, Cersei's mom, she loves that she gets a new amber necklace from Helios every time she gives birth. She has her four lovely strings for each child, but like I don't know. There's so much about her that feels narcissistic and is all about appearances. So that when Cersei is born and she's a girl, she wrinkles her nose when she says it's a girl to
Mm-hmm.
Helios. And Helios says, "Oh, that's fine. She'll make a fair match for somebody," meaning like I'm gonna make money off of her somehow. And she says, "How fair? This might be consolation if I could be traded if it or sorry, Cersei's commentary to how fair is this might be consolation if I could be traded for something better. My father considered fingering the wisps of my hair, examining my eyes and the cut of my cheeks. A prince, I think. A prince, my mother said. You do not mean a mortal. And there's like revulsion on her face while she's talking about my daughter can end up married to a mortal. And like we also get a little commentary there on the different ways her parents have described mortals. So we find out that her mom has said mortals are akin to savage bags of rotten flesh, and her dad thinks um, mortals are shaped like us, but only as much as the worm is shaped like the whale. It's like,
Yeah, that was interesting, I'll say. I'll say like when I read that, I was like, is that what rich people think of us? Um
yeah,
because that's what that feels like. That like we resemble, we are human shaped, but
mhm,
we are not like them. Because that's very much what that felt like. I'm sure that's what she was going for, because what other
yeah,
analogy can you make? Like living in this world, seeing super powerful people talk about other beings as if they're less than and ugly and terrible and smell bad, and literally every racial like micro or macroaggression you've ever heard of in your life, they're saying that about like humans.
mhm,
Um, and it's like, I know that you guys have things to do with them, so this is interesting. That you're
yeah,
talking about them this way, but that's very much what that felt like, of like, oh, they're like these tiny little things underneath us that we can like stomp with our feet, and why would you ever think about them or care about them, or why would my daughter ever even touch one of them? She would get cooties if she did. um
yeah. And like so Cersei's mom seems completely disgusted in that way. Cersei's dad is like, I mean, but if we get a dowry, or wait, isn't a dowry the other way? Anyway, you know what I mean. If we get like a
mhm.
bride price for her. Then she's like, the mother says, surely she'll marry a son of Zeus. And he says, no, her hair is streaked like a lynx. In her chin, there is a sharpness to it that is less than pleasing. I think meaning more like that angular masculine type jawline.
Mhm.
Um, and then they stop talking about it. She quickly recovers from birth, and then she's like, come on, let us make a better one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the very first interaction Cersei had with her parents. And it goes to show how narcissistic both of them are, in my opinion. Like her dad's a little more low key of a narcissist. He's the kind that's getting by on his charm, but the
Mhm.
mom is more outright about it, especially with Cersei.
Yeah. And it's interesting that that's usually how it works in
Hmm.
life, where like usually the people that kind of can get by on like charm or seeming
Hmm.
like they're nice are usually the ones that people don't realize are not that great, and then the one that just is obvious about it because they don't care are the
Hmm.
ones that you notice. Because yeah, I definitely hated her mom the entire
Yeah.
time I was reading these chapters. I was like, can somebody kill her or something? She's a god, she can't die, but can they do that anyway so that I
Yeah.
don't have to read her talking like that anymore? Because it's bringing back bad memories from my life with my dad. That's exactly the kind of shit that he would say to me. Um, and I'm not appreciating reading this from a different character.
Oh my
Um,
gosh. Yeah.
but yeah, it's just I thought it was. I don't. I don't know if like Madeline Miller is, for lack of a better word, like woke.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't know if this is like me projecting my own thoughts and opinions and stuff on her writing, or if this was something that she meant to write. She published this book in 2018.
Hmm.
Um, so set like 7 years after the Song of Achilles. So it's possible that she like read some stuff in the times between when it comes to like racial things, but or just like gender things and racial things, because the way that she was just they described Circe was like a very like gender like what is the phrase I'm thinking of, like beauty standards
Hmm.
sort of thing, like because Circe doesn't look what is seen as like a beautiful girl. They're like, well, nobody's gonna want her, or she can't be with Zeus because mixed with somebody with that like DNA, for lack of a better word, they're she they wouldn't make cute kids. Like that's
Yeah.
what it sounded like her dad was saying, like, oh, she can't mate with those people because their kids won't be attractive. And it's like, what? But just like the
Yeah.
way that they're talking about the way that she looks like with like the beauty standard, which is a very racially motivated thing. Like that's the thing behind most of the racial attacks against black people, is that they don't look like what European people decided beauty is supposed to look like. Um, and so I don't know if she was putting that in on purpose or she stumbled upon it by accident, that talking about like the going against the beauty standard, she just ended up kind of saying something like that that could be looked at that way, or she meant it, because the whole talking about the whole beauty standard being very like Eurocentric and racist is a somewhat post 2020 discussion that people started having, and this came out before that. So I
Somewhat.
honestly don't know, and
So,
so I don't want to give
I
her
mean,
credit for something she didn't actually do.
so it's a classicist thing. Medea follows this line. So Medea is very much thought to be a not Greek person. You know, like the whole
Hmm.
play in her name that Euripides wrote is centered on like her husband is leaving her to marry a real Greek princess. And she is the niece of Circe. So Circe, in concept, has this same kind of foreignness baked into her character. She's described as fair haired, and I don't know if that's just the way old timey translators translate it, but
Hmm.
like I think the word is euphlakos, something like that. But like the word means good haired, you know, and so it's translated usually fair haired, which like having this link streak is kind of an interesting thing to put in there then of like she doesn't have this beautiful, pure perfect hair, which like again is commonly translated as golden haired or fair
Hmm.
haired. So I think the European beauty standards, I don't know which ones are truly Greek and which ones are the old ass people that, you know, like started classics putting their beauty standards onto things.
Hmm. And I will say, like, we talked about this when we did our video about Medusa, but that myth too has very racial, like, feelings
Mhm.
about it. Like, there's one of the many myths about her says that her and her sisters were living in a cave in Africa.
Yeah.
That's only one of them. So that one was written later on when I think people started like somewhat recognizing that overall theme. But just
Hmm.
the theme of her being like an ugly person with like essentially curly hair and just like a big nose and things like that, of how she was described early on when she was just a gorgon and they just
Hmm.
killed her, so that they could use her to win battles.
Yeah.
um, that it feels very like that they're describing the other, like the other people, whoever that other people were for them. That's what it
Yes.
sounds like they're describing, and that's why I think it's really funny when classicist people talk about that myth and they like are clinging to it so much. I'm like, the people of that time started turning her into someone that looked better or like attractive or like a nice girl because they realized kind of at some point what that myth made them feel like.
Hmm.
And that's like why that naturally started changing in the same way that people hear stories now. And like when you hear a story in the news or you see like a woman being, misogynistically attacked or what have you, people immediately are suspicious of
Yeah.
what's actually going on in the same kind of way. And so there is that like tone in like Greek mythology because it was written by people.
Hmm.
And that stuff is just going to be there. And especially when mostly like privileged white people are the ones that have been like rereading it and translating it, they see it only through their lens.
Hmm.
And so that's how they're going to see that stuff through the thing that they think is happening as opposed to what could actually be happening or whatever. I just always think that stuff is interesting. That is in Greek mythology. I just wish that people would let them talk about it a little bit more.
Yeah, and I mean, we can acknowledge the very human reality behind it is that most people didn't get to travel somewhere foreign. So
Mm-hmm.
xenophobia, like, it makes more sense if you're in a world where you don't really ever leave your home country ever. All of the people all look the same, and then one day you get the luck to go to Africa, let's say, and you see people have a different complexion than you and their features are different than you. It's gonna freak you out just a little bit, like
Mm-hmm.
especially when you don't even realize that's a possibility, like that is a thing that happens. People are born with different skin colors. What? Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so um you can acknowledge that that's the reality behind it and still talk about, yeah, it's xenophobic no matter what. But like, did they have a reason to be more so than we do now? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, there's always a reason, and it's interesting to talk about why that is, but it's just
mhm.
like that kind of stuff is always there, and it always affects how people imagine stories and things like that. It just is always somehow just a subconscious thing that we all kind of do.
Yeah.
Um, that's what I find interesting about all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so we after her birth, she grows quickly. It says her infancy was the work of hours. Her toddlerhood was a few moments beyond that. She had an aunt who stayed behind and tried to help out to see if she can get a little bit of favor in Helios's house. That aunt gave her name Circe, which she says is hawk. So it comes from the Greek word kurkos, which can mean hawk. It can also mean like hoop, which if you look on Theoi, the they're like, oh, it means something about a circle. And it's like, oh no, it's just hawk. But she named her that because she has these golden eyes of Helios. They say yellow, but it's because it ends up being a thing with her and her siblings.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like all of Helios's descendants have the same eyes. It's part of the Apollodorus story of Jason and the Argonauts that when Medea and Jason go to Circe's island to be cleansed of Medea murdering her brother, that Circe automatically recognizes like this is my kin. She has the same eyes. So, all of them, all the descendants of Helios have the same eyes. Hers aren't different in yellow. This is a narrative thing, I think, just to other her even more with her siblings.
Mm-hmm. And I definitely wanted to like punch her siblings in the head. Um,
Yeah.
you just want to.
Yes. The other reason they say she was named Circe was because of her voice. Now, this comes from a line in the Odyssey where that's where they acknowledge her divinity. It's, I'm not even going to attempt the Greek, but it's like wonderful human voiced goddess. And so the idea being that for some reason her voice sounds more human than regular gods, although it can be argued that like she was speaking in plain speak and not some sort of goddess speak, and that's what it like the phrase is really hard. I never actually looked at any of my like Greek to see if there's footnotes in it in like the Greek version that I have, but people were arguing about it when I looked it up just on my phone on Reddit. So I do think it could either be that she just happens to use a human's voice when she's speaking to Odysseus. Um, but yeah, Madeline chose to make like the voice thing a thing with this version of Circe. And so the aunt remarks her crying sounds different. That's why she's calling her Hawk. And then her brother and sister make fun of her for it. Later, some half sisters make fun of her for it. So she's kind of in between mortal and divine is the idea we're supposed to be getting here. She talks about her dad. He like leaves throughout the day because he's literally the sun. So he goes, he does his sun duties, and then he comes back at nighttime to their all obsidian house because he loves the way he reflects in it. Um, yeah. This line, I'm so curious at your thoughts. I literally highlighted this one just because I wanted to see what Shannon thought. Like, of course, he did not consider how black it would be when he was gone. My father has never been able to imagine the world without himself in it.
Oh God. Yeah, I saw that just like my eyes rolled out of my head because yeah, that's exactly people like that is they like don't the only way I ever know how to describe people like that when I'm trying to explain like not only my dad but other characters that resemble him is
Hmm.
that they generally don't think about the fact that like people could exist. Like they could have opinions or like want to do things or want to experience things that are different from what you think and that the way that you think isn't like the obvious thing that everyone should go with just because you think it. Like it generally doesn't occur to them. And so it's like, yeah, of course he thinks like, well, I like how it feels when I'm home and I reflect off of everything because it makes me feel all cool and fancy and stuff. But he doesn't, not only does he probably not consider like the obvious that like when he's not there, then everything is really dark. And thinking about the just the idea of him being like gone and the people being there existing like without him, that probably doesn't
Hmm.
occur to him. But then also, even if it did occur to him, he probably wouldn't think about how the other people in the home would be affected by his decisions. He just is like, yeah, this is what I want, so I'm going to do it. And everyone else is obviously going to love it because it's my idea. So
Hmm.
obviously, this is the best thing for everybody because it came from my head. And it's like, that,
Yeah.
that's exactly what people like that are like. Like, it's part of the frustration when I'm trying to talk about people and characters like that is that they genuinely don't consider and and I don't mean to say this in like an in like babying them or anything, but
Hmm.
they generally don't think about what the other people would feel. Like it never enters their mind, not even one time, how their actions might affect other people. Like you have to argue with them
Hmm.
for decades. If you're me, you have to try to argue with them to even get them to accept the reality that the things that they do might affect other people
Hmm.
because of the choices. Like they don't even accept the idea that that could even be real. And so that is like an accurate way to describe somebody like him of like, yeah, like I don't care and I don't even think about the fact that I'm making my entire family just like exist in the dark so that
Hmm.
when I'm there, it's like better for me. It
Yeah.
just, I'm sure that it never even occurred to him what that would be like for everybody else because it's like, well, why would I think about anybody else but me?
Yeah. Let's see. So we find out she loves to lay at his feet, literally listen to everything he says, watch him play. Um, what did she say? He plays draughts by himself, and his mom would always, or her mom would always try to like get him away. Will you not come to bed, my love? Um, this made me laugh. Those were like the times when he would say, "No, I'm still playing." Those were my favorite times, for my mother would go slamming the Merwood door behind her. Just like loved watching her mom get denied by her dad.
Hmm.
Let's
And
see.
that is just for anyone wondering. That is like the literal, if there is a definition of emotional incest or enmeshment or both, it's that you if you're a
Yes.
child and you're glad that your mom doesn't get something from your dad, especially when it's like romantically related, because he wants to stay with you instead.
You might be in an emotionally incestuous relationship.
you
Yep.
might you might want to do that. You might want to watch all of our content. Just
Yes.
if that's you, that's the place to start because we talk about that a lot. But yeah, that's a really good example of that situation. And she's just like, yeah, he likes me better, and it's everything is somehow about him somehow.
Yeah. So we find out Cersei's powers are like a limited version of Helios's too in this kind of early first paragraph, or sorry, early first chapter, where he talks about how if a mortal saw him in his fullest glory, he would immediately burn that mortal. And Cersei is like, okay, well, what about me? What if I saw a mortal? And he says, well, that mortal would just count himself lucky, like, because she's a nymph and she's just gonna look extremely beautiful to a mortal.
That reminded me of Percy Jackson, how like the
Yeah.
gods showing their true form is like a weapon they
Yes.
use. Like in the first book, at the end, when Ares is being a little bitch and he's lost to a 12-year-old child,
Yeah.
he uses his form because he's just angry and doesn't care. And if he gets to incinerate them after he's gone, that's a plus. But it's like a ultimate sort of move for the gods in that world that if they show their form, then they're going to incinerate their children. And
Yep.
so they only do it when they've completely lost like total control basically.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was interesting how in this version of it, no matter no matter what, it seems like if they ever are around mortals, that's just like what's going to happen, and they just don't care like at
Hmm.
all.
Yeah. So then her siblings start being born in the story. So first we have Pasiphae, which Pasiphae is the Minotaur's mom. She eventually gets married off to Minos. But one thing that I like just I underlined this just because I was laughing at it. So unlike when Cersei was born, as you said, the other siblings seem to have these favorable prophecies almost. And so he says with Pasiphae, you will marry an eternal son of Zeus. And it says after that he used his prophecy voice, and I was just like Trelawney from Harry Potter, like
Yes.
just
Like
a prophecy voice.
or like imagining like I don't even know what, but that's the closest thing, like your voice drops down a couple octaves.
Yes. So he's just like, you will marry an eternal son of Zeus, just randomly. Okay. And
And you're
everyone's just
just
like,
like
it's your prophecy voice.
like I just picture in my head, I just picture his voice suddenly getting darker like that somehow. And or like that, it's like that one is that's what I'm thinking of Lord of the Rings, when Gandalf gets mad at Bilbo in the very beginning and he's yelling at him because he doesn't want to leave the ring, and all of like the light goes away and it's just dark and it's him just like yelling in a different voice, and Bilbo's like, I'm sorry, and then as soon as he's done, he just like goes back and you just hear birds chirping. That's just like what I'm imagining here, that they're like hear that and then all of a sudden it's just like silence for a couple seconds, like okay. Like
Yeah.
when how often does he do that?
Let's see. We also find out that their timekeeping isn't very well being immortal. Like they don't actually know how much time has passed. So shortly after, her mother gives birth to another child, a boy, calls him Perses for herself. And the two of them quickly saw how much more loved they were. They love to stare at me behind their ermine paws. Her eyes are yellow as piss. Her voice is screechy as an owl. She's called Hawk, but should be called Goat for her ugliness. Now you'll love this one because I found a myth while I was doing research for this that ties back to the Aegis, which we hate for the fact that it's literally the gods using Medusa's head as a symbol of
Yeah.
like this is the most terrifying thing on the battlefield. Well, apparently the Aegis has a goat-like hide, and that goat-like hide comes from one of Helios's other daughters, who was born with a very, very beautiful body but an ugly face. And so they buried her and then decided later she was going to be used to create the Aegis.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So the connection to goat here is that's like when she's described as like a terrible goat lady. And so it's just interesting they called her goat. This is kind of calling back to that myth, I think, but like in a low key kind of way without getting too into it.
Yeah, all of these scenes were like I don't know, they're
Yes.
just really hard. Like I don't know if I'll ever get over those sort of triggers of like when people would say that kind of stuff, because
Hmm.
so many people said that kind of stuff to me. Jesus fucking Christ. It was like, it's not like it was just my dad, it was like everybody. Like my mom was the nice one. Like she never said anything like that to me and was the one that would be nice, but it wasn't, it was like my sister and my dad and everyone I ever met at school from the time that I was in kindergarten.
Hmm.
Like it was relentless, and that's why it's very hard for me to believe when people say nice things to me now, and I'm like, are you sure? Because like thousands of people told me by the time that I was like 13 that I sucked. And so, and they said that kind of stuff. They just like find something about you no matter what.
We find out that they're not just bullies to Circe, but they're bullies to other people. One person that's mentioned is Melia, who's like another nymph that's kind of tangentially related. I believe that she's a daughter of Oceanus, if I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking of the right person. So she's like their pseudo aunt. Um, and they bully her into cutting off all of her hair by saying, "Oh, but all the Olympians are doing it." And let's see. After that, we find out about her half sisters. These two are somewhat famous, though always lumped together. They don't really have their own stories. And these are Lampetia and Phaethusa, radiant and shining. So Circe gets to go with her dad to go visit his cattle, and they are the guardians of the cattle. These are also the sisters that in the myth of what's his name? Why did I just forget his name? The kid who drives on the chariot with Helios. Phaethon. Phaethon, in his myth, when he crashes into the ocean and dies, they're the ones that cry themselves into poplar trees, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, so she meets these two half sisters. They say she must be one of Percy's children. Look at her eyes. Of course, Lampetia. I thought it was Lampetia. Stroked my hair. Darling, eyes are not. Darling, your eyes are nothing to worry about, nothing at all. Your mother is very beautiful, but she has never been strong. And she says, my eyes are like yours. No, no, sweet darling. Ours are bright as fire. And our hair like the sun on the water. You're clever to keep yours in a braid. The brown streak does not look so bad then. It is a shame you cannot hide your voice the same way. Um, so they're automatically just picking on her for the exact same thing she's already hearing at home from the other siblings. That she doesn't look enough like a descendant of Helios when, again, like it's in the mythology. Like she looks like a descendant of Helios. People can tell right away this is somebody powerful because the way she looks is so strange.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to have other gods gaslight her because I want to see where she takes this when we eventually get to her meeting mortals for sure. But like I kind of like this setup here where people are essentially gaslighting her in telling her you're not like a real goddess.
Well, okay, so one of the things that Jean, when we had her on, when she was talking about Circe with us, she was talking about how this book is like a big story about the patriarchy and misogyny and things like that. That
Hmm.
Circe is somebody that is in the course of this book just kind of realizes that you can never like succeed necessarily or be happy in that world if you're trying. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is that from this point on, the way that this family is structured is that the dad is the number one person, and everyone
Hmm.
else just kind of like falls in line after him. The way that why I think the prophecy thing is interesting is because he, by his having a power where he can prophesize about things, he
Hmm.
basically is pronouncing which children are important in his world and which ones are not. And so Circe from the start is somebody that does not is not accepted in this like patriarchal system, purely based on like nothing, just because her dad didn't have a reaction to her when she was born. And so everyone else in this family is gaslighting her about she looks different from everyone else, you're different somehow, you don't look like me, even though she does, because they need to like validate that system that they
Hmm.
live under, because they think that because they always are trying to like please him somehow, thinking that if he's happy with them, that he'll get what they want. Like those sisters are trying to like be really nice to him in this chapter when he shows up and he's a dick to them. In
Hmm.
that kind of a way, they're always trying to like get ahead, and the way to get ahead in this family and in this world is for him to like you more. And so they're like,
Yeah.
because he doesn't give her a prophecy, the rest of them are all kind of like left to, they have to say these things to her in
Hmm.
order to stay within like the world that they are. Like it's not like a choice, like they have to, it's like compulsory almost. They have to do that kind of stuff to her because when you're living under a patriarchal world, if you don't like uphold the system, then people just get scared about like, well, then what's going to happen to me
Hmm.
if I don't go along with this thing, because this is the only thing that I know. And so that's what everyone is doing. Like they're not only gaslighting her, they're gaslighting themselves about the
Yeah.
fact that she is somehow different or less than everybody else. But that's why they're doing that with her, because her dad basically made this judgment about her from the time that she was born, and now they all are left to like play these roles where they find themselves doing this stuff with, and they don't even probably fully realize that they're doing it because it's the only way they know how to like get by in this world. And I think that's Cersei's whole thing probably in this book, is realizing at this point, at a certain point, like I don't care about that anymore. Like
Hmm.
way farther down the line, but that I feel like most people, especially like female presenting, I'll say, people that are in like the scapegoated role in anything, there's at least a certain point, at some point, where you just don't care about that anymore, and you just
Hmm.
want to, just be yourself, and you don't care that you don't look how people want you to look. And
Yeah.
and like the whoever the male person is in your life, that they don't like you, you just don't care. I felt like because of my dad, I got like a leg up on that. I was like that when I was like 8.
Hmm.
I just did not care. Like men liking me was my entire life problem, and so that's not what I wanted. I wanted the opposite.
Yeah.
And I just didn't care if nobody liked me because of that. I'm like, ew, get away from me. But
Yes.
that's what I really liked that about this part, that everyone who meets her is like left to try to like legitimize this like weird thing that they're all doing, instead of just admitting that the prophecy thing doesn't matter. It doesn't actually mean anything, because
Hmm.
it doesn't mean, like, just because you have a prophecy for you doesn't mean that your life is going to be more like memorable or interesting or whatever. Like, do you really
Yeah.
think that the sister who ends up having the Minotaur lives like a happier life than Cersei?
Definitely not. So, yeah, it's kind of an interesting setup we're getting here. She gets gaslit again with these half sisters. They're introducing her to the cattle they're taking care of, and like they're going through the names and they say one name twice. And Cersei's like, "Oh, you already said that. You said that one's Darling." And they're like, "No, you must have been mistaken because that's Darling over there." And it just kind of sets up this dynamic. While they're introducing the horses, all of a sudden Helios is like, "Do I see a tiny scab on one of the horses?" And so the girls have to kind of rush in and like, "Oh, you stupid horse, you've hurt yourself or someone's hurt you," or all of that. And that's kind of the cue to exit. But this was another kind of hint that the dad is more narcissistic than Cersei seems to realize at this point. Because as
Mm-hmm.
they're leaving, um, he starts telling Cersei that there is a profession out there that the mortals have called astronomers, and it centers around him, the sun. And so sometimes when these astronomers get called upon by kings to predict things, he throws them off because he thinks it's fun. Like, essentially, he thinks it's fun. They get killed by the kings for telling wrong prophecies, or not wrong prophecies, but like wrong predictions. And he just kind of laughs at the whole thing happening. Now, when he says this to Cersei, she says that she feels strange. Like, she was thinking about it because she's like, wait, you're telling me this. Are we leaving late now? Is that why you're thinking of this? And he's like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we definitely threw off some of them. And so she, when she says, I feel strange, it's like she's feeling empathy and she doesn't recognize what this emotion is because nobody in her household has it.
Yeah,
She's just
no
like,
one else has that actual feeling.
yeah,
And so she's like, "Oh, I don't like this." But
yeah.
yeah, like
It's like I feel bad for another person? What?
yeah. Like I don't even know if I have trauma from the narcissistic abuse community,
Hmm.
and I don't even know that the word narcissistic is like actually the correct word for that, to like know that people are going to die, like these
Hmm.
lesser tiny people that you think look like worms, basically compared to like you,
Yeah.
that they're going to die because people are going to think that they're lying about their calculations because of you, and you're basically like having fun with that, like knowing that you can
Hmm.
like mess with them that way, and that those people will die a horrible death because you just like want to leave a little bit late. um i don't
Yeah.
I don't know the right word for that. But like narcissistic just doesn't feel like almost like enough for the
Yeah.
like that kind of those kind of games. But that's because I hate the way that people talk about narcissism in general because of how people are like that on the internet. So I don't even know the right word. Just like insert the word here for what that is, because that's just
Yeah.
like a level of just cruelty in a way, of just like finding pleasure in people being harmed because of you, and not even and like enjoying the fact that they will. It does set up very much what happens in the second chapter though, very well.
Yeah. Well, and it also shows us his attitude in general is just what she remarks is it was what they deserved, he said. Helios the sun was bound to no will but his own, and none might say what he would do. So basically, he's just doing it because, like, you're not gonna tell me what I do, even though I do literally the same thing every day with my chariot.
Mm-hmm.
At dinner, she's still feeling strange, and her dad had told her when she's like, I feel strange. He's like, you're just hungry. It's fine. So they go, they have dinner, and when she's back with her siblings and her mother, they're like, oh, so you saw dad's beautiful heifers? Do you know what he does to them? And it's ironic that it comes from Pasiphae of like he turns himself into a heifer. I'll just say it like the least gross way. But he turns himself into a heifer and he's the one who keeps breeding them. His flock isn't immortal because this is like, what the mythology is that the flock that they're talking about is an immortal flock. So none are ever born to it and none ever die from it. But like the siblings are joking with her in a way of like, oh, he turns into a bull, he personally breeds the heifers, and then he kills off the old ones. So that's what you just went to go see. And the mom kind of laughs at this, doesn't confirm or deny, is just like, stupid Circe. She's like, wait, is this true?
Yeah, I hate that.
Yeah. Also, I wanted to know your opinion of how chapter one ends. Just like the last paragraph is, such were the years then. I would like to say that at the while I waited to break out, but the truth is, I'm afraid I might have floated on believing those dull miseries were all there was until the end of days.
Ugh.
Yep.
Yeah, that's just like how that is. Like I know I said that kind of stuff when we were talking about Star Wars stuff last week, but
Hmm.
it just how it is. Like I just didn't. One of the things with kids when you grow up in a very abusive home like that is that it's the only thing that you know,
Hmm.
and so you don't know anything different. Like one of my big that I've never brought up on here before, that because there hasn't been something where it really comes up, is the whole thing that the internet does right now with like thinking that your kid's going to a sleepover is like what you should do because, oh, if they go to a sleepover they might be abused. Not only is that like completely avoiding the actual thing that will keep your child safe, which is like isolating them more doesn't keep your child safe because it's the people that you know and trust that are more likely to do it than anybody else.
Hmm.
If you talk to your kid about situations and like how they feel and what comments or things that people say to them that makes them feel uncomfortable, or the way that they touch them makes them uncomfortable, even if it's just like literal just like touching, not anything
Hmm.
like more than that. But touching that they would do in front of other people. Those are like the things, if you have an open relationship with your child, they'll come and tell you about that stuff. Or when they're at a sleepover, if they feel uncomfortable, they'll call you and tell you about it, and then you can come and pick them up and go home. That's the thing that's going to keep your kid safe more than just like isolating them. But when I was growing up, going to sleepovers was how I figured out that there was something wrong with my dad. Like
Yeah.
I can remember like when I was 6, and this might have been the first time I slept over at somebody's house because I don't remember a time before this. But when I was 6, I was sleeping over at my childhood best friend's house, and I couldn't sleep because it was so quiet and nobody was yelling. And I remember we went out because we lived out in the country. We went out and like played in like we were just walking through their land that had a bunch of like forests and trees and stuff and some like little rivers and things like that. And we got before we left, her mom told us not to get like our shoes muddy or something. And then of course we ended up falling into one of the little rivers, and so they got muddy. And I was afraid the whole time we were walking back that she would start screaming at us for doing that. And instead she saw them and just laughed, put them in like the washer and dryer to go just fix it. And I remember like she walked away and I was just standing there looking at them and looking at her like, that's it?
Yeah.
That's all she's gonna say? That's all she's gonna do? And that was like, I like cried that night when I was trying to sleep because I couldn't sleep because it was so quiet. Because that was me realizing that the way that he is not normal. And I never would have realized that if I wasn't around other people that could show me that it's not normal. And like I sometimes argue with myself that maybe it would have been better for me somehow if I knew that if I could pretend like it was normal for a little bit longer, because being aware of that doesn't exactly make that an easier experience. It makes it worse. But that's like when I figured that stuff out. And so Cersei at this point has never been around anyone else. And so this is just what she thinks life is like.
Yeah.
And like the comments that her mom just like says to her in front of her, like, oh, Cersei is so stupid, and Cersei's so annoying, nobody wants Cersei, why does Cersei's voice sound like that, along with her siblings just like making fun of her because she doesn't know about something, and the only reason that they know is because they were given a prophecy from their dad. They didn't actually do anything to make them like somehow more important, but they're getting like preferential treatment anyway. But you just don't know until you actually meet other people. And this kind of stuff happens in the second chapter because they introduce her having a sibling that is a lot nicer to her. That's really the first time that she sees a difference.
Yeah.
That there is a difference with how people can treat her
Well,
to a
and
certain
she had to
extent.
create that. But like, yeah, we'll get there. So, chapter 2 is all about Prometheus. And here we're getting backstory not only about Prometheus, but about the Titans in general and where the Titans currently stand with the Olympians, which is that Helios and Oceanus are kind of the most revered of the Titans. They're the ones that were able to support Zeus, cut a deal with him, keep their domain. And so they all kind of go to Helios when something's going on. And this chapter is about Prometheus getting punished for giving fire to the mortals. So they say he was in Tartarus, that he's going to face a public humiliation, and then he's going to be actually punished. The Titans are all really, really scared with this happening, like, and the fact that his punishment has been decided because he was stuck in Tartarus until they actually decided what they were going to do. That this means maybe the war is going to be revived. And Cersei is, from this narrative at least, is a generation removed from the Titan War. She's thinking, oh shoot, all of these horrible things I heard stories of could potentially happen to me if this restarts, as she's at her father's feet, hearing all of the Titans coming to him scared. Um, but yeah, her dad maintains the entire time, well, we gotta listen to Zeus. Zeus knows what he's doing. Prometheus was impertinent. We'll just use the Percy Jackson word. He defied him, and so he deserves to be punished. He kind of just stays pro Zeus throughout, despite the fact that everybody's scared, and he's kind of reassuring them like, as long as we listen to Zeus, this isn't going to happen to us too.
He's doing the same thing
Yeah.
that like everyone else is doing with Circe. He is deferring to like the patriarchal person in charge of the entire system and being like, yeah, we have to defer to Zeus because what else do we do if we don't defer to him? This is
Yeah.
just the only thing we have to ever get ahead. And he's just doing the same thing. And like he's this all powerful God that is like, I'm the sun and I'm the best, but he's still doing it.
Hmm.
He's still like his mind is like addicted to this abusive system that doesn't do anything for anybody, and he's still trying to find a way to validate it. Like he's the most powerful god around, but he still can't figure out that there's actually no real reason why he's actually following Zeus.
Yeah, and so Helios's role in a lot of myths with the Olympians tends to be he can just see everything. So he's a little bit involved in the capture of Persephone because he saw it, he witnessed it. He's the one able to tell Demeter like your daughter was taken. With Aphrodite and Ares' love affair, he's also witness to that and is able to be like, hey, so your wife's sleeping around, Hephaestus. Um, and I mean, he eventually does get sidelined. So when you think about it, eventually Apollo ends up kind of swallowing the sun duties in a way, in the
Mm-hmm.
same way that Artemis swallows Selene's duties, which, by the way, that's Helios's sister. So Helios, as a child of Oceanus, his siblings are Eos the dawn and Selene the moon. And when you think about it, it's because sun rises from the east, so people probably thought it was literally coming out of the sea at one point.
Mm-hmm.
So that's both Helios and dawn. And then when it sets and the moon comes, it's coming. That's also going back towards the sea. Um, so they're all eventually going to also have their duties, their dominions, in a sense, taken away. But he doesn't really seem to. He's kind of just going with the flow because he doesn't want to lose importance, even though he gets no rewards for helping Zeus out in the Titan War.
Mm-hmm. He's just kind of going with the idea that he might one day, and that's enough for him
Hmm.
to not really try to rock the boat, at least for now.
Yeah. Now, interesting thing that Circe remarks when they're finding out about the fact that Prometheus is going to be publicly punished is that she remarks that the gods are very, very fascinated by the idea of pain. It's so foreign to them because they are immortal, because they do tend to stay out of things like that as much as possible. And yeah, there was this horrible Titan in Olympian War, but like other than that, they try to stay out of it. So like they don't feel pain in the same way.
Well, and also, like, what is pain when you can't die?
Yeah.
Like, pain, how we feel it is like it showing you that there's something wrong that
Hmm.
you want to then try to deal with so it stops, because we at some point die. But like, if you never die, then like, what do you, then
Yeah.
what are you gonna do? Sorry. So one one of my Percy Jackson friends is sending me screenshots, and all I can see is the word Luke. And then when I
Oh
was like, oh no,
gosh.
somebody's saying something.
Something's happening with Luke. Okay. We'll get to that on Wednesday.
That was just funny. I'll be seeing that in the middle. Just it pop up, and all the only word that I can see is Luke. And I was like, oh no, what is somebody saying on the internet?
Um,
Anyway, but well, yeah, I don't remember what I was saying anymore.
let's see. So, anyways, we can skip to the punishment. So with Prometheus's punishment, we find out he had been given over to one of the Furies, um, and the the gods are all kind of like, oh my gosh, have you heard about the Furies? I heard they have serpent tails. I heard they have scorpion tails. I hear their eyes are dripping blood. It's giving Gorgon kind of the
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and Furies are Gorgon-like. That's generally how they're described. They snake hair, dressed in all black. Sometimes they have wings, sometimes they don't. Um, they carry whips, so that actually is accurate. And eventually, this Fury does lead Prometheus into the spot to be punished in front of everybody. She is whipping him, and essentially, the way that it's described is because Prometheus is a Titan and can heal super fast, she's whipping him even faster so that like he does not have time to heal. And poor Circe, who like literally like she knows the concept that yeah, people like her can bleed, but she's literally never seen it. So this is her first time and she's watching his ichor get like just thrashed everywhere. Um, let's see. And after the final blow happens and everybody kind of goes off to go have a feast after enjoying watching this torture for some reason, she's the only one that kind of hangs back. And this is where we see again, she has that spark of empathy, even though she's never witnessed this with her family at all, where she goes up to Prometheus, who's still bound, who's still sitting there in his own ichor, and she says, I could bring you nectar. And he just looks up to her and says, I would thank you for that. Like, he hadn't cried out once in his entire torment, she notices. Um, and so she just kind of has a conversation with him where, she's helping him drink this nectar. He kind of figures out who she is right away from her eyes. Um, and he says, thank you for your kindness. She offers to bring him food, and he says, I don't think I'll ever eat again, which, like, she actually remarks, this is this is a pretty big deal because although us immortals don't have to eat, we eat and sleep for the pleasure of it. So he's basically saying, I'm never going to take pleasure in something, like
Mm-hmm.
ever again after this.
And they're all just like watching that happen,
Hmm.
and none of them are like, hey, even if you don't care about him, like personally, like what's happening to him, because I think there definitely is a thing going on where they're like, like I'm glad it's not me, sort of
Hmm.
thing, and they don't want to like rock the boat in that way. But it's also like a thing of you guys could easily like come up with some scheme,
Yeah.
using him by rescuing him and making them think that he's dead or something, and or whatever the god version of that would be, and doing some scheme or whatever if you want to mess with Zeus. But nobody ever thinks of it, and it's like all of these super powerful beings are helpless. Like Zeus is not even
Yeah.
physically here.
Well,
He's
and I
not
think this
here.
is this is why they set up the Titan War thing, I think, is because that's the implication, is that all of the Titans who would protect him, who want to protect him, don't because they don't want to start another war with the Olympians. They're all scared of Zeus. And he doesn't even need to be there for that fear to extend because he's that type of leader.
Yeah, it's like he doesn't even have to be around in order for people to feel like he's watching them. Like they feel like they're always being watched somehow by him. And if they mess up, they're like, "Oh, I don't want some of us to die or be exiled or whatever."
Hmm.
Again, so now they're just like okay with watching this guy get like whipped like this and be
Yeah.
like left to just be tortured basically the rest of his known existence.
Yeah, so like nobody even notices him while they're all feasting. They don't notice that he's still there and that Cersei's there and that Cersei's talking to him, which like because of who he is, you should be afraid of a young god or goddess talking to this person if you really are on Zeus's side.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, none of them care either way. So she gets to have this full conversation with Prometheus. And one of the things that she talks about with him is like, hey, you're here in the first place because you helped out mortals, right? What are they like? Because again, her parents in the last chapter said her mom said they're rotten pieces of savage flesh, and her dad was like, they're worms. And so he actually gives her a more realistic answer, and he said there's no singular answer. They are each different. The only thing they share is death. You know the word? And she says, I know it, but I do not understand it. Uh, God can, their bodies crumble and pass into the earth. Their souls turn to cold smoke and fly to the underworld. There they can eat nothing and drink nothing and feel no warmth. Everything they reach for slips from their grasp. That's a Tantalus reference.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and a shiver goes across her skin. She says, "How do they bear it?" And he replies, "The best they can." And I felt that in my soul right now, in this current timeline that we're in. Now, because of Prometheus, I have to bring up the quote in Prometheus Bound. Like, it's so crazy how I got to being stuck on this quote, because I got to being stuck on this quote because that stupid fan fiction we read was like Paul Blof is like perspective, and Percy saying, "Oh, we should be reading Prometheus Bound." Prometheus has this whole speech about how he helped out Zeus. And what do tyrants do? They eventually turn on their friends. What's happening right now with Musk and and Trump?
Mm-hmm.
Like we're literally seeing that in action over and over and over again. So I need to point out that the Prometheus reference and him saying, mortals are really just trying the best they can. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is too real for me right now.
Yeah, that's that's honestly what it is, and like that's like the always the interesting thing about the gods versus like the normal people in
Hmm.
these stories. That I think it's that's why I think it's so weird that when people like want to be the gods or want to like the gods or don't like stories because they don't like the gods, because it's like
Hmm.
we're the interesting people. We're the things that make these stories interesting. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of like crabby like rich bitches like
Hmm.
arguing about which one of them is more special and which one has more gold or whatever. And but there's like nothing interesting about that because none of them can die.
Yeah.
And so no matter the worst things that they do to each other, it never really feels that important or interesting. It's just this kind of like, okay, whatever. That would get really boring after a while. Like
Yeah,
that's why
because it's
they
like never actually done.
yeah. And that's why they introduce the whole thing of demigods, because then demigods are partly human and so they can die. And so it that makes what happens to them feel much more important, and everything they do feel much more important because there is an end date
Hmm.
to their life, and that makes the gods like make decisions because of what will happen to them and vice versa. And but it's like without us in these stories nobody would like them. And
Yeah.
because it's just like who wants to be around a bunch of people who have no idea what it's like to really feel pain or to like die, to grieve somebody, to
Hmm.
like just like the basic things. Like yeah, it's a lot harder to live a life where you know that those things are going to happen, but that's part of the whole thing. That's part of
Yeah.
what makes life, it like kind of is one of those things of when I before my cats died, I used to look at them sometimes and I would be like, it's going to hurt so bad when you die,
Hmm.
but having you is worth it. And
Yeah.
but that's basically what it is. It's like, yeah, we are really sad when somebody dies that we care about, but at least we have that. We have that like on forever going memory of that person. The gods don't even know what that really feels like. How do they even know what love is? Because they never like feel the absence of it. Like they don't have to ever worry about people leaving or going away or dying or not being around anymore,
I mean, they just
because
make new ones instead. That's
yeah,
kind of
like
their
because
version.
everyone they know is immortal. Like you like I know that like somebody dying is not the only way to know if you love someone, but it is just like I feel like that's like one of the purest forms of love is just what you remember about that person or thing or whatever after they're not around anymore.
Hmm.
And so it's that's like the thing that gets that like connects people in like in a way that you can never really understand, like to bring up like the political stuff like George Floyd. That whole situation became what it was because that little 9-year-old girl filmed a video of him crying out for his mother who is
Yeah.
already dead. And so that is what made that entire massive thing happen, because no matter who you are, watching a video of somebody being strangled to death crying for their mother who has already been dead for many years, and you're thinking like is he seeing her right now, but just thinking that he's so scared that he's calling for his mom like he's a little kid
Hmm.
and just wants his mom, and you're like this is so wrong. And that's what made that entire huge thing happen, because that's just something that every person can connect to, that went through people's even like racist ideas that made them finally confront them for the first time. And it's like the gods never feel that.
Hmm.
because the only things that they really have to feel like that are their children.
Yeah.
That's like the closest they get to that, but they still don't treat their kids the way that they should, and so they don't really fully feel that a lot of the time because they
Yeah, I
don't
mean,
like.
like some lovers too, but even then, it's like, oh, I'm sad, and then I turn you into a flower, and that's it.
Yeah, like
Um,
Zeus in Harry, no, in Percy Jackson, like Thalia is dying and Zeus is like, I'm gonna make her a tree. And like Percy's response of like he's the most powerful god on the planet and all he did to help his daughter is to turn her into a tree is the
yes.
absolute like correct response to that of like that's the best thing you could come up with is to make her a tree. You didn't think to like save her before this moment or
Hmm.
do something else. You just like turned her into something that looks pretty. Like what
Yeah.
do you what? But it's just but that's like the best that they can come up with because I don't think they even understand like what that even means. And
Well,
that's why I
and
think that it's like
yeah.
that's why I find the gods like almost like boring in these stories. A lot of the time because I'm like I don't want to talk to people who don't even know what like actually being alive is really like.
Yeah, well, so the quote that I falsely attributed to the actual Iliad from Troy, the
Hmm.
movie Troy, it was surprisingly deep. It was one of those ones where it's like this could have been so good that Homer wrote it. Was Achilles says at one point to Briseis, where I'm pretty sure she was asking what are the gods like, knowing that he has talked to them, and he says the gods envy us because we like our lives actually mean something.
Hmm.
Like that was the gist of the quote. I don't remember the exact quote, but it was like because we can die, our lives actually have meaning, and that's
I
why they
think
envy us.
I think it's funny that you thought that that was from something because it was actually like smart
Deep.
sounding and everything else in
Yes.
that movie is stupid. But I also think that it's funny that you did that and then you the other thing is that you thought that the Nemean lion thing happened in The Mist and it was just literally a Percy Jackson
Yeah.
chapter that you
Yeah, I was
just
like, I
forgot.
remember somebody shooting it like, yeah, so it does get mixed up in my head, but I'll never say anything's definite canon. Like,
No.
but yeah, so I mean, it's interesting that she's showing this like curiosity towards mortals simply because, and you kind of get this feeling it's because of that conversation that happened when she was literally just born. So, like, how does she actually even know about that conversation? I mean, I know the book is written in her voice, so theoretically she knows about it.
Hmm.
But it all happened because her mom was scared of her marrying a mortal, that she's all of a sudden like, oh, so what are mortals like? And
Yeah.
this curiosity, it extends past, I want to know what my parents think because she doesn't like being around her parents, clearly.
And one thing from this part that I thought was accurate for like this scapegoaty stuff is how no one at the party is paying attention to anything she does.
Hmm.
And so nobody else would ever be able to just like sneak into the room with Prometheus and have this whole conversation with him
Yeah.
because anyone else would have noticed that they were gone and been like wondering what they were doing. That just reminds me of stuff that I would do when I was a kid. Like the first few years that we would go to one of my aunt's house for Thanksgiving,
Hmm.
and she has a really big house. And so I would go, we used to like play in like her basement with like her exercise equipment
Yeah.
for some reason because her kids were much older than us. And so she didn't have like toys or anything. That was the closest we got with like toys. But I can remember that I would get like overwhelmed by all of the people and I would go and get food and then come into like her basement and like sit in there by myself to like eat when I would need like a break from everybody else. And times when I would do that, like my mom would come downstairs and be like, "What are you doing? Like, why are you down here by yourself?" And she would come and find me and notice that I was down there, and come and like bring me back upstairs. Um, but she was like the one that would notice that. Everyone else would just be like wrapped up in whatever they were doing up there.
Yeah.
And it would just like leave me down there by myself, which like I wanted to be down there by myself. That's why I was there. But it was more that that's just how that is. There's usually like one person, like my mom, that would notice that I was gone, but everyone else is just kind of like in their own little world.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, the rest of this chapter, the thing that I wanted to talk about was don't understand why Prometheus turned himself in.
Yeah, she asks him that. She's like, I heard you turned yourself in. I heard that you. And then, like, eventually she even realizes he has prophetic powers too. So, like, he knew he was going to get punished, turning himself in, going willingly to Zeus, even doing it in the first place, going against his will and giving the mortals fire. He knew the entire time.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's like the whole patriarchal thing again, that he wanted to he knew what his punishment would be if he defied Zeus. So he did it anyway because he wanted to give the humans, a little something after
Hmm.
seeing us try to figure all of that stuff out without them giving us any help. But it was like a thing of he was very aware that like this is what I'm gonna do, what's gonna happen, no matter what. But so we just
Hmm.
kind of accepted it of like, yeah, this is the like the world that I live in. These are the consequences that I will have for what I do, and so I'm still gonna do it, even if I know that this is gonna be the response. I'm still gonna do it, but that kind of is, to me, that's why he just turns himself in, because he's like, yeah, this is just how these things work. When
Yeah.
you defy Zeus, you have to pay a price, and so I know I'm gonna pay a price, so I'm just gonna do it and get it over with. And
And
it still doesn't
yeah.
occur to him that like the price he's paying is like absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, and with the Olympians, with Zeus in particular, what's crazy about the entire thing, I mean, I know Zeus chooses to wipe out mortals here and there, but like it's so important to the Olympians to have people to worship at their altars, and yet like you have so little regard for these people. So
Does
if
that remind you of
Prometheus,
anybody else?
yeah. So, like, Prometheus is really the only one protecting that system, and he doesn't even benefit from it. It's not like people were out there at altars to Prometheus in the same way. I mean,
Mm-mm.
I know that some classicist is going to correct me. I'm sure there was a Prometheus cult. But, like, yeah, he's not a part of the grand pantheon, so to speak.
Yeah, he's not Zeus.
She says, perhaps I only flattered myself, but I'm pretty sure he smiled at me a little bit there. Then she walks away. She realizes nobody noticed she was gone. She says, "One more nymph child among a thousand thousands," is how she describes it. Like there's so many nymphs there. She's just one in a thousand thousands.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's see. She ends up going to her dad's treasury, and she picks up a dagger that's carved with a lion's face that a king had given to her father. And she remembers this one time when she asked her dad about it. And her dad said that the king was hoping to gain his favor. She asked, and did he? And he says no. Just simply no. Like, I was given this beautiful gift, and
I still told him no.
yep. Let's see. But with that knife, I think this moment with Prometheus has her questioning herself, and she decides to cut her hand open with the knife. And she sees that her blood runs red. It does, like, the wound ends up healing itself, not as fast as what was happening with Prometheus, but it does. And so she is like, I am alike, but I'm also not alike to them, kind of discovering this all on her own because nobody talks to her about these things. That brings us to chapter 3. So she wakes up, Prometheus is gone, and she heard he got moved to a peak in Caucasus and was chained there to have an eagle commanded to come every noon and tear out his liver and eat it, steaming from his flesh. So another unspeakable torment.
Ugh.
Hercules is the one who eventually saves him from this rock. But I wanted to mention the eagle thing because, like, she says eventually all of the people stopped gossiping about Prometheus. You know, other stuff was happening. A dryad stabbed one of the Graces with her hairpin. Uncle Boreas and Apollo had fallen in love with the same immortal youth. They're talking about Hyacinthus.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then Boreas lets him die because he gets hit in the head with a discus, and sometimes it's because Apollo threw it so hard he didn't know his godly strength, and other times it's the wind carried it. Um, Someone's daughter got changed into a bird, But she's still curious about Prometheus. She's asking, will he ever be let go? Is there any news about him? Everyone's like, what news would there be? Like, who cares about him? Um, so then let's see, then we get to her brother being born. So eventually, after this, she has a second brother, Aedes. Now, Aedes is notable mostly for being in the Medea and Jason myth. It's Medea's dad. And he's also right away put next to Circe's name in the Odyssey. Like it says her brother is Aedes before it even says that her mom is Perse and her
Mm-hmm.
dad is Helios in the Odyssey. He is described as not even going to attempt the Greek word, but it's usually translated as baleful, but one of the other translations is destructive minded. And another notable thing I want to say about him is she says that his name is Eagle, which, we it's kind of interesting that it is broken up. Like there's literally one of those little like mark things before we get from Prometheus to Aedes, but it's kind of interesting that soon after that happening, he names his kid Eagle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Circe ends up asking like, can I have him? Essentially, can I take care of him? Can he be my baby? And they're all like, yeah, go ahead, take care of him. So he ends up becoming her closest sibling for the simple fact that she is the one who raises him.
Mm-hmm.
They become very attached. He loves her, like she's finally shown familial love because she had to create it. And so the reason I bring up that the word used to describe him in the Odyssey is this destructive minded word is because one of the things she says is even as a child, he seemed to understand what others did not. He could name the monsters who lived in the sea's darkest trenches. He knew what herbs Zeus had poured down Kronos' throat that were called pharmaca. Um, they could work wonders upon the world, and many grew from the fallen blood of gods. And he's asking her philosophical questions, so he seems to be smarter than the rest of the family somehow. And it's just interesting again that like he's usually described as more like crafty smart in mythology than he is like positive smart. So I kind of do like Madeline like twisting this around of Circe would see that as, oh, he was extremely gifted early on. He asks me things that I would never think of myself. Is he asks her, um, how does your divinity feel? And she's just like, what the hell even is that? Like that's what I would be like, what is that question? What do you mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
it'd be like us asking each other, how does your mortality feel? And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, yeah, if you search your soul, you could come up with an answer, but like it's not something you think about in that way. So he tells her, mine feels like a column of water that pours ceaselessly over itself, and it is clear down to its rocks. And so she gives an answer that is similar, and he's like, no, you're just saying that because that's how I said mine. And she finally just comes up with a shell. And he says, aha, a shell like a clam or like a conch. A conch. And what is in that shell? A snail? Nothing, I said, air. Those are not the same thing. Nothing is empty void, while air is what fills all else. It is breath and life and spirit, the words we speak. And it's during this conversation she tells him, like, hey, so when Prometheus was getting punished, I helped him and I had a
Mm-hmm.
conversation with him. And he just says, have you told anyone else this? She says no. And he's like, yeah, you probably shouldn't. And next time you're going to defy the gods, do it for a better reason. I'd hate to see my sister turned into cinders for nothing. So I feel like this line is probably going to be important later. It's one of those lines where because it gets repeated at another point too in this third chapter. So you just know that this is the idea that's going to keep coming up is like if you're going to defy the gods, at least have a good reason. We just had that whole thing with Prometheus of him
Mm-hmm.
defying the gods. Was it a good reason? Yeah, he saved humanity and he gave them all of these arts in doing so.
Mm-hmm.
So like that's kind of who I think they're setting up Cersei to be.
Yeah. And it also shows kind of like the coldness in a way of her brother, that he's very tactical
Hmm.
in that, like he knows kind of how to move through this family and get kind of what he needs, and
Hmm.
survive it without making anybody too upset, and like keeping himself safe. Like that's a
Yeah.
very younger sibling thing to do, to kind of know how to like use everybody that's around them to get what they need.
Hmm.
um, but it also, when you know of what happens later on, like now that I've read this, you also can use that as like the first like little clue, um, that that's like how he sees everybody in the family. So he's not as like connected to her as she is connected to him, I guess.
Yeah.
It's the best way to put it.
Yeah, and we do get that later in this chapter. So the next thing that happens is Pasiphae gets married off, and we find out she's getting married off to Minos. Their mom is not happy because Minos is technically a mortal; he's a demigod, but because um, because Helios had said that thing about him being an eternal son of Zeus, he was mostly referring to his role in the underworld.
Mm-hmm.
And like, oh yeah, he's going to keep playing, this important role even into death. Um, Pasiphae doesn't seem that unhappy with this match. She seems like she's going to be very happy with being a queen. But what Circe gets out of this experience is, because Minos is mortal, she realizes that once she gets to that wedding, she's going to see mortals for the first time ever.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that she describes them is, she's like, first of all, she's confused because she's heard the stories of mortals doing things to nymphs. We don't have to say the actual word because we're on TikTok live, but like abusing nymphs. And she's like, but they look so weak. They look like mushroom gills. Their faces are drawn down, their skin saggy, it doesn't hug as tightly to their bodies. Their hair looks lank. Like they just look like a lesser version of humans, almost, is how I would characterize her description of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's just kind of like, I don't get it. Like they seem not that great. They both are like equally afraid of each other. Like the nymphs are afraid of the mortals knowing what mortals do to nymphs, and then the mortals during this wedding are kind of off to themselves and looking down and looking scared because they don't want to piss off any of the gods that are in presence. Call back to the Olympians being at this wedding, I think, is going back to the mom even, and how she was hoping if one of her children gets married to a son of Zeus or a daughter of Zeus, that she could mingle with, like Zeus and Hera, and that's not really even happening here.
No, but it's like the only like way that she could try to get that.
Hmm.
And so it's like just using your kids' lives as a way to try to socially get ahead.
Hmm.
There's definitely moms that do that kind of thing now.
Yeah. So Cersei realizes Pasiphae looks like she's gonna be happy here. That's fine. They notice Daedalus walk in, which is kind of an interesting callback to the book we just read.
I know. I was like, what the hell?
And then after that, Aedes reveals, "Father is gonna give me a kingdom," and she said, "I thought he was joking, and may I live there?" "No," he said, "it is mine. You will have to get your own." And this is that moment of, she definitely cares about him more than he cares about her. Because he didn't tell her this was happening. That's one of the next things she says is like, "Why didn't you tell me you're going away?" He's like, "Why would I have told you? Like, I'm just leaving after this. That's what's happening." And soon after that, Perses, her other brother, goes off to Persia, which like he has a lot of mythological ties to. I forget if he's like the mythological king of Persia or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but he also goes off to his own kingdom, and so in the span of what was days, she is now the only one in the house again with her parents, and it feels a lot like when she was first born, sitting at her father's feet and, just hanging out.
Yeah, the part from that I thought like worked the best was when she's upset with him and her brother, and she's saying like, you don't understand what it was like before you were around. Um, like that's very true of like a scapegoated person. If you
Hmm.
have younger siblings, the only reason that I didn't become like a felon when I was growing up, like legitimately, the only reason I didn't ever try to like run away or break rules or laws or just do anything, because like what's the point of following laws when this is going on at home and nobody cares? The only
Hmm.
reason I didn't do any of that stuff is because I had my younger sister. And
Yeah.
I if I did any of that stuff, then I couldn't be there to help protect her, and so I didn't. But if she wasn't there, I would have ran away. I would have been like gotten in trouble probably with the cops for trying to run away. I would have been like a kid like that. And the only reason that I wasn't is because I felt like a responsibility from the time that I was really little to have to like help her or protect her or something. Like one of the like family stories my mom has told since I was little is that like when she brought my sister home from the hospital, usually there's like a whole transition when you have multiple kids where the older one is like jealous of the attention that the baby is getting and things like that, and they like have to like learn
Hmm.
how to handle that. They usually like regress and like want to act like a baby or something, or just younger than they actually are to get attention from their parents the way that their sibling is. I didn't do any of that, like at all. As soon
Hmm.
as my sister came home from the hospital, and I was 2, like
Yeah.
she was born the month before I turned 2. And so as soon as she came home from the hospital, I wanted to like hold her when people wouldn't let me hold her because I was only 2.
Hmm.
But I wanted to take care of her. I was never like jealous of her. I was never upset at her getting attention from my parents. I never did any of that stuff. And like recently, my mom was telling that story again, and Cassie was like, "That's not normal." And I'm like, "I know."
Hmm.
Like, what else can I say but that? Like, I don't know why. Like, I can guess why my 2-year-old self was doing that, but I don't know for sure because I was only 2.
Yeah.
Um, but that's the kind of stuff that you do. Like when you have somebody else to take care of, it's like, oh, I have a purpose now. Because things are scary and bad, but now I have to protect this innocent thing so that it can stay innocent. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what she was doing with her brother. And so him leaving her is like, but wait, like, I had a purpose before to help you, but if you're gone, then there's nothing. And I
Yeah. Like
just go
what
back to
now?
feeling depressed all the time.
Yeah, and the chapter ends with her saying, "But then a boat came," and I actually don't know enough of Circe's pre-Odyssey mythology to say what exactly that's in reference to just yet. Part of me kind of likes coming up with the mythology references as they're happening with this one, especially
Mm-hmm.
since like we've already talked about Circe in the Odyssey. We could probably link back to it in the description somehow, but like I'm sure we talked about it when we were doing Sea of Monsters where like who she is in the Odyssey is only part of it, and there's not a ton of other myths. Like I know there's ones with Scylla and Charybdis that we'll probably get into, and
Mm-hmm.
I've mentioned here and there Medea. She's a big part of Medea's myth as well. So those family ties are going to come up again. But with this one, I kind of like talking about the mythology as it comes up rather than trying to anticipate what's going to happen next.
Yeah, I know one of the gods that we already know is in this book, because I remember that one review that I read of this book where somebody had like a major depressive episode after reading this book to the point that she didn't even want the book to be in her house anymore. And when she was a 16-year-old kid who read it,
Hmm.
and so I know that that person is in this book, but other than that, I don't know anything about Circe but what's in the Odyssey, which is like the end point kind of like her overall story. Like that's after many things have happened. And
Hmm.
so we don't know what happened before that, and that's what this book is all about. But I like that. I That's more fun. I
Yeah,
like being surprised by it than going in like knowing. At least for me.
yeah, like I know there are post Odyssey things like in some versions she has babies with Odysseus and she maybe have She may have been around when he died. I don't know. I saw the headline on VOA, but I didn't read that far yet because I want to see which version Madeline goes with and then
Mm-hmm.
talk about that. But yeah, it was kind of an interesting little thing to see this family that feels so familiar in a divinity story. And you're kind of already getting the sense in a way she's not going to get married off to leave. Something else is going to happen. Like that's the feel like I'm getting. Or if she's going to be potentially married off, it's not going to work out because I mean she is by herself in the Odyssey. She doesn't have a husband. So we have to imagine something happens. So even if this boat that's coming is some sort of suitor or something, this isn't it for her. Her destiny is going to be something different than what's expected of her.
Mm-hmm. And it's also like, who who is that? What do they want? Why are they here? Why would they come and talk to her? Nobody wants to talk to her.
Yeah.
Um, all those sort of questions to
Yeah,
see
she
like
has that
where
stripe in her hair and her eyes are yellow, not golden. Like, who would want her? So
she won't have
sad.
sex with cows. How dare she?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
like, but yeah, I either way, this was interesting. I'll say like I never know how to feel when I'm just reading a book and I'm like, oh yeah, this is my family. Um, what am I supposed to do about that? like,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just really weird. It always makes me feel really strange in a way because I'm just like, yeah, it's I when I'm reading it, I'm like, this is probably really upsetting for other people, and like it's upsetting in a way, but not the way that it would be for other people,
Yeah.
because when I read this, I'm like, I can like feel like the way that I used to feel when I was growing up, like that mindset that I had that I you have to have when you're in that role to survive that sort of family of just like everything is horrible, nothing is ever going to get better. Everybody is like the worst person you can possibly imagine. No one's ever going to help me, so I just have to like accept that and just try to find a way to survive kind of thought. That's immediately as soon as I started reading the book, that's just like, oh right, okay. Like
Yeah.
that's where we're at now. And I don't like that anymore because that's not my life anymore. And so it like reminded me of when I felt like that all the time, and I was like, ugh, like I don't like. That's why kept trying not to read it when the chapters first started, because
Yeah.
I was just like, ew, I don't like these people. I don't want to read about these people. Get me away. I don't want to read them.
Yeah, well then there's stuff that's in between both of our experiences with like growing up in households like this because she's still staying within her patriarchal role in
hmm
this that she's expecting if I'm gonna get out of this household somehow it's probably gonna be through marriage. Like this is all unspoken at this moment, of course, but I'm sure that that's the expectation.
hmm
And that's kind of the situation I had where it's like, I'm not happy with my home life. The only way out of this is to get married because I was told you're not allowed to move out of this house unless you're getting married. Um, with you, I have to wonder, like, what's coming up for you being somebody who knew, like, as soon as I'm old enough, I'm gonna try to get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, I was gonna say like when I was like 12 or something, I was already like a grizzled like veteran, and people and my dad would tell me that I would change my mind later on when my friends would get married, and I was like, I'm not gonna get married and have children because of peer pressure.
Yeah.
Um, but I at that point already I was like telling them like I don't want to get married, I don't want to have kids. Um, because of how my life was, that I was already sure of that when I was in seventh grade, and I never changed my mind about that. Father, never changed my mind about that. Nope, definitely not. But yeah, I just saw that like she wants. I guess it's complicated when you're in a family like that, and like finding like a romantic partner is one of the socially acceptable ways to get away. That's why a lot of people who are in that role end up getting married really young, sometimes to not that nice of people, sometimes to nice people, but sometimes to really not nice people, because because we're just like looking for a way to escape. And but more than that, we're looking for a way to escape that is like socially acceptable enough to our family where they won't come after us if we when we leave, and
Yeah.
they won't find a way to like convince us to come back or something, or we won't feel guilty about the fact that we are leaving. And so one of the ways to do that is to get married. The other way to do that is to go to college. That's why most kids in that situation are like counting down the days in a way that more than kids usually do, even
Hmm.
to graduate high school and to get to college. College is like the dream for everything. Like I would sit there and think about that. Like one day I'll go to college and I just like imagine that everything in my life that sucked would somehow just magically be better when I was in
Hmm.
college because I wasn't living at home anymore. And it's one of the hard things for you to realize during those years that all of the problems you have are still there, because
Yeah.
you just wanted, that's like the thing that you just thought about all the time, like everything will somehow be fixed if I just don't live at home anymore. And I will say that when you are when you don't want to get married and you don't want to have kids, that makes it really hard to do that.
Hmm.
To like get away without being like very noticeable, I guess, that you're doing something that's different from everybody else. Because I didn't do any of that stuff. Like I didn't do any of the relationship stuff at all. I went to college for a couple years and then dropped out and went back and got my associate's degree many years later. But still, all the things that you can do to get away, I tried to do them, but I just couldn't do them.
Hmm.
And so I just was like, I guess I'm just gonna sit here then and wait for him to die. Um,
Luckily, he died quickly.
yeah,
Flash.
but that's why it took me so long to ever do anything, was because it was like, well, I can't be in a relationship with another person. I can't do that kind of stuff. And ironically, because of him, at least part of it, I don't know. I'll never know if I would have been asexual without him or not. But
Yeah.
it's just, at least part of it was from him. And so the fact that I couldn't do it at all was from him. Like some people would just like pretend to like convince yourself that you care about this person that you don't really care about so you can get away.
Hmm.
Which I'm wondering if that's going to be like the kind of thing that Cersei does, like
Yeah.
probably. But sometimes, but I couldn't do that. And so it was just like I just couldn't. It was too like triggering, I guess is the best word for it. It feels like a stupid word to say it because it's a lot worse than that. But I just couldn't do it. And so because I couldn't, I just like had no way out really of
Hmm.
like cutting off contact with him. And because then if I did that when without any of that stuff as an excuse, then there was then my family would know that like something was wrong and they would start asking questions. And I
Yeah.
was like, I can't do that because that's even more terrifying than normal. And so I just like felt stuck. That's why I always wanted to find like a group of friends or something to replace like my family, because I just wanted some people who could care about me consistently, that could like rescue me from that situation. I just wanted there to be someone I could find somewhere where I could just like move away from home and have a reason for why I was leaving that my
Hmm.
family wouldn't see as like a warning or something that would make them question if something was wrong. So I could
Yeah.
just like leave and disappear and still like see them and talk to them when I wanted to, but otherwise wasn't there because I didn't have the other things. I couldn't do the other things that are acceptable to do. Um, to like this may seem like a random, it's not that random, but like when the Menendez brothers were in the news because
Hmm.
their case was being brought up again, um, like it makes complete and total sense that the thing that made them do it is when the dad wasn't letting the younger sibling move out when he was in college.
Hmm.
He told him he would let him move out when he was in college.
Yeah.
And then he was like, actually, no, I'm not letting you leave. You're not going to be able to live in the dorms. You're going to have to stay here. And I was like, that when I heard that, I was like, that's him telling you I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
because the only thing that keeps you going during those years is the idea that when you get to college age, you'll be able to leave. The older sibling got to leave and go to college, but him telling him, like, I'm not letting you leave, it's like, I'm gonna die in this house. And that's why when they said it was like a life or death situation, it's like, yeah, that is a life or death situation. It's
Hmm.
like if he's not gonna let me leave for college, he's not gonna ever let me leave. And so,
Hmm.
like, how, what do I have to, like, I have to do something to get away from him, or else I'm not gonna survive. Like, whether
Yeah.
it's like because he kills me, or because he literally like kills me from like the inside and I just stop existing as myself. No matter, or both. No matter
Yeah.
what, it's like, that's why I was like, yeah, that is a life or death situation. And I don't know if people get that who've never experienced that before, but I'm like, yeah, that is absolutely the thing. That's usually the thing that makes us do something. Um, like with the Alyssa Turney situation, there's all this speculation that she was gonna, that she was about to go into her senior year of high school, and that's why
Hmm.
her dad did that to her, is because
Oh, yeah.
she was like making connection. She had a boyfriend that she was with that loved her a lot. That guy still loves her a lot now.
Yeah.
It was like going on the news and like crying at the time when he was like 17 years old. He was the only one like looking for her then,
Hmm.
because obviously his her dad wasn't really looking for her. And so she had like a relationship that he couldn't control. He tried to ruin it and it didn't work.
Hmm.
And so that was the only thing he could do to try to stop her from being able to get away from him. And it's the same kind of thing when when they threaten you being able to escape, you have to do something. Um, like, that's life or death. And so for Cersei, I'm really interested to see like how that happens. Like, if she goes back and forth, like if
Hmm.
she leaves and comes back, or like how she ends up in the situation that she is in the Odyssey, where she has her own island, but she's like
Men. Yeah.
trapping men on it and turning them into pigs, and it's the only thing that like brings her joy,
Hmm. Not just
is
pigs.
to like manipulate men like that
Yeah.
way, by like trapping them and then turning them into like a helpless little like
Well, I
being that
will
she has
say,
power over, I guess.
yeah, well, I have to wonder about all of the animals on Cersei's Island. This is kind of a segue, but like it's described in a couple of the people coming onto Cersei's Island myths that she has lions and wolves outside of her little castle,
Hmm.
and that they're friendly. Like they come up to you and wag their tails. And so you have to wonder if those are men that have been trapped and enchanted. Like
Yeah.
all of the animals on that island are sus to me. But that's besides the point. But like yeah, so for me the idea of getting married, becoming a parent in my own right, those were both like, oh, this is how you're going to escape because my mom used to imply and like none of this was ever spoken. None of it was ever like you're not allowed to leave, you're not allowed to do this. It was just like I don't well no, it was you're not allowed to move out until you're married. But also like the other stipulation she had said is after you graduate college, which to me implies you're going to live here through college. So
Hmm.
I didn't even look at out of state schools. Like I didn't even look at out of the Bay Area schools when
Hmm.
I was, like first when I graduated from high school, even though I had a respectable GPA, did not look into college at all, just went on to community college. And then when I went to community college and was like, oh, I should probably get serious about this, I didn't look that far. The farthest I looked was Stanford, which is 45 minutes from me.
Hmm.
So it would have been a school that I would still be commuting to, most likely. Like,
Hmm.
I had no plans to leave just from that simple suggestion. And what eventually was my like, oh, I get to move out moment was getting pregnant. Like, I was very much like, I am not raising a baby in this house. But even then, I still feel like my mom had some control over me. As part of why I went no contact was just
Hmm.
because, especially like Latina moms, there's something about them where they think their maternal authority does not ever die. They are always situated above you when it comes to authority. It doesn't matter if you have your own kids, doesn't matter if you're married, doesn't matter if you're in your own fucking house. Like,
Hmm.
they still have authority over what you're saying and doing.
Every family has its own rules. And
Hmm.
that was a family, that was a rule in your family because your mom is obsessed with Jesus, that
Yes.
the like one surefire way to get some a little bit of distance from her is to like have a baby before you're married, and that like gives you the permission to do
Hmm.
the things that you normally wouldn't have done like on your own.
Yeah.
And that's just like what that stuff is. That's what every family has, those different like rules that you're just that everyone knows to follow without anyone actually saying it. You just kind of learn that
Hmm.
this is just how things work. It's just every family has slightly different ones.
Hmm.
Um, and that was just yours. And like, I don't even know what, like, with mine, it was just purely like, I can't leave. I can't go that far because my dad's a monster. And if I leave, I'm the only one that he'll listen to
Yeah.
in
So
like a
then you're
gross
leaving both
way.
your mom and your sister if you
Yeah.
leave.
And like times when I wasn't around, he would do stuff like that with them. Like my sister would call me when I was at school, like in college, when the couple years that I was in college, especially the first year that I was, she would call me, and my mom would like take the like I could hear my mom in the background of the phone like telling her like don't call her, like that's not her responsibility.
Hmm.
And she would like hang the phone up, but then that would like ruin my entire day, obviously, because I would just pick up the phone and hear him screaming at them. And like
Yeah.
my sister's only way of knowing how to deal with him was to call me and to have me talk to him, because that was the only way to get him to shut up sometimes was me doing that. And so that's what she was doing when she was doing that, like you talk to him and get him to stop doing this. And so but that's why like I could never go that far away from home. I never thought about going that far, or like moving away or any of that kind of stuff, because it's like I can't leave because my dad might kill them if I'm gone.
Yeah.
And it's just like that was just what it was. Like I just could never like leave, and then with that it's like you just feel like you have to stay. And then when he died, especially, that's why I went to therapy a couple years after he died, is because he was gone. And so it's like what am I doing?
Yeah.
And like with my life, like especially because the year after he died was like right after, like a couple months after he died, like 4 months or so after he died, was when my sister met the guy that she's still with now, 11 years, almost 11 years later.
Hmm.
And they have my niece together and everything. And so she, like right after he died, found the person for her.
Hmm.
And a couple months, like about a year after he died, was when we moved out from living together for like 6 or 7 years. And I remember that I just like cried so much, and that was a big deal for me to cry then because I didn't have any feelings.
Yeah.
Um, and but I was crying about that because it was like I spent my whole life taking care of you, and he's gone, and now that he's gone, you're just like moving on with your life, and I'm like here alone, and I don't have anything to show for any of it because your life is good, but my life sucks ass.
Yeah.
And that's why it took me a couple more years after that. It took like 3 or more years after that to actually go to therapy, but that's why I eventually got there, is because I was just like, he's gone now. My mom's okay. She started dating somebody who treats her very nice eventually, too. And my sister's with somebody who treats her very nice. And they're living their lives, and I don't need to protect them from anybody anymore because he's gone. So I guess I should actually figure out what I want to do. And that's what I've been doing ever since then. And it's taken like all this time to get close to figuring that out. But yeah, that's basically how that stuff works when you're in that role and you don't have another way to get away. You just don't get away.
Yeah.
And that just like makes me think of your mom.
Yeah.
I don't let myself think about your mom too much in that way because it just makes me really, really depressed. That like he left by leaving. I mean, he died. Like he died when I was 29.
Hmm.
And so I'm now 40, so over the last 11 years I've been able to like figure out who I actually am, like my actual personality when it's not suppressed around him, and be able to like talk about the things that I love and the stuff that I enjoy without being terrified of somebody saying something horrible about me or something.
Hmm.
And just being able to like actually enjoy my life and find things that I like for myself, and find like good relationships instead of ones that suck ass and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But if he was here, none of that would have happened. Like I
Yeah.
know that, like it never would have happened if he was still alive. And so it just makes me really sad to think that your mom has just lived her entire life like that. Um,
Yeah,
and
my
even though she
mom,
got
like,
married, she's been married multiple times, but she just has never been able to do that.
well, for her, it always goes back to I have one living parent, she's all I have left, and it's like, okay, but that doesn't mean anything to me. Sorry. Like,
No, it
I
doesn't. Like it doesn't mean anything really. It doesn't mean those are like rules that your mom's mom obviously like made as like family rules, like unspoken family rules of like, oh well, my husband's gone at a young age and so you have to take care of me because he's gone and I'm alone. And it's
yeah.
like, yeah, but she doesn't care if you're alone. Like she doesn't
Yeah.
care what happens to you. So who cares? And
Yeah,
it's
it
like,
skipped her wedding, her second wedding to the person who she's most likely going to be with for the rest of her life, and yet you have my mom going and doing grocery runs for you. Like that's what pisses me off about my mom and my grandma now.
mhm.
And even if I'm not in communication with her, I'm still mad at it. I'm still mad that my mom is being dutiful daughter. Um, yeah.
Yeah. It just makes me sad. Like, and I know you know how I usually talk about your mom.
Yeah.
But it's just true. Like, I would be a horrible person too if I never got a chance to get away from him and be my own person, because that's just what happens to you. You kind of have to turn into that in order to even like survive it.
Yeah, the
Um,
thing is, like, you don't romanticize who he was for you. Like, that's
no,
the difference. It's like
but I
her
used to.
romanticizing the idea of a mom.
I used to. This
Yeah.
is why I say that like literally everyone that knows me now would not have liked me like 6 years ago.
Hmm.
Um, Even closer than that, but especially 6 years ago, because I did romanticize him like that before that. When he died, I thought that I was sad because I missed him for
Hmm.
many years.
Jeez,
Like, I
yeah.
thought that's how I thought about it. People used to try to tell me stuff about him in the same way that, like, people bring it up with Cersei in these chapters. And
Hmm.
I would get mad at them because
Yeah.
I didn't, because you don't want to do it, because it's like this, at least for me, it's not quite this bad with Cersei obviously, but for me and other people in that family situation, when the abuse is that bad, it's like there's this door in your mind that is just like locked shut permanently. And every couple weeks or so, something would happen that would bring up the like two memories that my brain just like never let me forget, that I could
Hmm.
never like explain away what was going on in those memories, that made me finally tell people about it later on. But every 2 weeks or so, something would happen that would remind me of those things, and I would let
Hmm.
myself think about them for like 10 seconds, and then I would just shut that door, and just refuse to think about it. And then they would pop up again like a week later and do the same thing over and over and over and over again for like decades. And so that's like what you do. And so if somebody brought up something that he did that wasn't okay, and I couldn't come up with a way to explain why he did that, then that's like bringing up all of those other things, and I couldn't do it. And that's why your mom does it too, but it's not a good, like, it doesn't excuse everything.
Hmm.
Like, people were trying to warn me that he was a horrible person, and I would get mad at them about it when he was a horrible person.
Yeah.
um and so it's like all those people were right about him all those years, and I always wish I could go back and like tell them that now, and I almost hope that they see me talking about him this way now that I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
But that's like why we do that kind of stuff, because it's like if I just like don't think about that and try, and like a lot of the things that I liked, the characters that I liked were like the people that reminded me of him somehow. because I was like trying to find somebody that reminded me of him that wasn't a horrible monster. Like the
Yeah.
main reason why I started liking Star Wars in the beginning is because Luke's whole storyline is trying to save his abusive dad.
Yeah.
And this is like the one storyline where it actually works. It never works. They never actually change their minds or listen to you. But the Star Wars version of it lets it actually work. And so that's why it was always funny when I think about it now that my dad hated that I liked Star Wars,
Hmm.
because the reason why I liked it so much was because I wanted to believe that I could do that like one day. And I
Hmm.
and I just didn't want to give up on that. And um that's why I liked Luke so much and liked it so much from at least during that time. That's
Yeah.
why I liked it so much. I like it for different reasons now. And he was just like, "Why do you like this stupid stuff?" And it's like, "Because I want to believe you're not a fucking monster, you idiot." Like,
Yeah.
but he never actually figured that out because he's not actually that smart, or like he wasn't when he was alive.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, it's just that's like the confusing part about that stuff is like it's just like a switch just flips in your mind when you let yourself actually acknowledge what happened to you, and all of a sudden you start
Yeah.
talking about them in a way that usually you never do, and everyone else around you is like, when the fuck did this happen? And you're like, these things have been inside my mind the entire time. I just didn't let myself actually think about them for longer
Yeah.
than 10 seconds at a time. But they don't know that.
You know, what's funny is me being no contact with my grandma since I was a teenager was a trigger for my mom to be able to open that, I think.
Oh
Because
yeah.
every once in a while she'd be like convincing me, you should talk to your grandma again. By the way, she threw me down the stairs as a toddler. And it's
Yeah.
like, what? Why are those two things happening in the same
Yeah.
conversation?
Cuz like you doing that was showing her the option that you she has the option to do that. And so there's a part of you that always wants to do that.
Yeah.
But it's also like terrifying to do that. And so she was like wanting to tell you things that her mom did to her because you want to tell people about that stuff.
Hmm.
But then at the same time was trying to convince you to talk to her because it was scarier for her to imagine not talking to her than trying to keep her in your life, even
Yeah.
though she did that kind of stuff to her.
Yeah.
It was just that's like the weird back and forth of all of that stuff.
Yeah.
It like we sound so confusing, but it's because the like traumatized and like actual like the way that I like picture this, like I know I have dissociative stuff going on. I don't have dissociative identity disorder, but there is some sort of a dissociative thing going on there because I can like recognize like the different sides of myself. But
Yeah.
the way that I picture that is like it's like the traumatized part of me and the way that that version of me talks versus like the actual me. And
Yeah.
so that was like your mom. Like the actual her was like trying to come out, but the traumatized version of her was too scared to let that come out. And so it was like arguing in her
Yeah.
head. So it was coming out like she was contradicting herself. And everybody around us is just like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. All right. Well, this seems like a good place to leave it. So as I said, we're doing two filming days. We're gonna see how this works out with putting some of our more like random chats into a second episode a week. Um, so what we have planned for Wednesday is we're gonna come back and we're gonna talk about Zoe Laverne grooming in general, and we'll also like do some wrap up thoughts on our Star Wars episode because the Star Wars bros did come into our comments. Luckily, not in the drones that Epic fans did, but they showed up. So we'll acknowledge them just a tiny bit, but only to tell them they're wrong.
Yeah, was telling her this before we recorded, but I hate Star Wars bros more than most things on the internet. They just make me so mad because they're always, the
Yeah.
things that they say are just so stupid.
That fandom is so all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyways, we will be back on Wednesday for some like just lighter discussion. If any fan news comes out about the Percy Jackson show too, we'll of course bring up that.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, we'll be back in a couple days.